The last candle in December. A silent warning no one noticed until it was too late. 0130 Hook. December 28th, 1998. A single candle flickers in the window of a quiet home on Maple Street. The flame dances against the frosted glass, casting shadows that no one bothers to notice. But here's what makes your blood run cold. That candle was a warning. A silent scream for help that an entire town walked past without a second thought. By December 29th, the woman who lit it had vanished. Her front door was wide open in freezing temperatures. Her coat still hung by the entrance. And that candle? Burned all the way down to nothing. Investigators would later say she knew exactly what was coming. She tried to tell someone, anyone, but the message was written in wax and fear, and no one spoke that language. Not until it was too late. What you're about to hear isn't just a mystery. It's a question that will follow you long after this video ends. Would you have seen the signs? Or would you have been just another person who walked right past the last candle in December? 133T's key questions. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This story takes place in Riverside, a small Midwest town where everyone knows everyone, and secrets don't stay buried for long, or so people thought. December 1998. The holidays are supposed to bring warmth, family, togetherness. But for Margaret Holloway, a 52-year-old school librarian, that December brought something else entirely. Something she couldn't name but could feel in her bones. Then there's Daniel Rowe, the neighbor who lived 3 houses down. Friendly guy, always offering to help, always around. Maybe a little too much. And Sheriff Alan Briggs, the man who walked into Margaret's home on the night of December 29th, and immediately felt the hair on his neck stand up. He would later say, "Something felt off from the moment I stepped inside. It was too quiet, too still, like the house itself was holding its breath." So, here's what we need to figure out. Why was the candle left burning in the window? Why did Margaret vanish without a trace? And who knew more than they were willing to say? 3:10. Backstory. Character setup. Let me tell you about Margaret Holloway, because understanding her is the only way this story makes sense. Margaret wasn't some recluse or paranoid shut-in. She was beloved. Kids at Riverside Elementary called her Miss Maggie. She organized the annual Christmas book drive, baked cookies for church fundraisers, and had this laugh that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. But beneath that warmth, there was something most people didn't see. Margaret had recently gone through a difficult divorce. After 23 years of marriage, she'd finally left her husband, Richard. Friends said it was long overdue. Richard was controlling, they whispered. He didn't like her going out, didn't like her having her own money. The divorce was finalized in October, and Margaret moved into a small rental house on Maple Street. For the first time in decades, she was alone, and at first, she seemed okay with it. But then December came. Margaret's sister, Claire, noticed the change. Margaret started calling more often. Sometimes, late at night. She'd say things like, "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you?" Or, "I keep hearing noises, but when I check, there's nothing there." Claire thought it was just nerves, adjusting to living alone after so many years. She told Margaret to get a dog, maybe install better locks. Margaret did install new locks. She also started a tradition that December, something she'd never done before. Every night, she would light a single candle and place it in the front window. When Claire asked why, Margaret said, "It's for peace. And so I know everything's still okay." Claire didn't press further. She wishes now that she had. Now, let's talk about Daniel Rowe. Daniel moved to Riverside about a year before all this happened. Early 40s. Recently laid off from a factory job. 2 towns over. Quiet guy. Kept to himself mostly. But he was helpful, you know? The kind of neighbor who'd shovel your driveway without asking, or help you carry groceries, Margaret appreciated that. After the divorce, Daniel started coming around more often. He'd check in, ask if she needed anything, bring her firewood when it got cold. People in town thought it was sweet. A lonely man and a lonely woman, maybe finding companionship. But there were a few people who thought Daniel was a little too interested, a little too present. Margaret never complained, though. In fact, she seemed to trust him. She even gave him her spare key in case of emergencies. That detail becomes important later. So here we are. A kind woman trying to rebuild her life. A helpful neighbor who might be too helpful. And the shadow of an ex-husband who doesn't seem ready to let go. Margaret's last words to her sister, spoken on December 27th, still echo. "If anything happens to me, Claire, look at the candle." Claire laughed it off. She thought Margaret was being dramatic. She would never forgive herself for that. 10:20, the incident. December 29th, 1998. 11:47 p.m. The temperature outside is 9 degrees. Daniel Rowe is the one who calls it in. He tells the dispatcher that Margaret's front door is wide open, and he can see inside from the street. No movement. No lights except the dim glow from the hallway. He sounds concerned, maybe even panicked. The dispatcher asks if he's checked inside. He says no. He didn't want to intrude. Sheriff Alan Briggs arrives 12 minutes later. He approaches the house slowly, flashlight cutting through the frozen air. The front door is indeed wide open. Snow has blown into the entryway, creating a thin white carpet that no one has stepped on. Briggs calls out. No answer. He steps inside. The house is cold, but not as cold as it should be. The heat is still on. The living room looks normal. A mug of tea sits on the coffee table, still full. Her reading glasses are folded neatly beside it. Her coat hangs on the rack by the door. Her purse is on the kitchen counter, wallet and keys inside. There's no sign of a struggle. No overturned furniture. No broken glass. But then, Briggs sees it. On the windowsill, a candle burned all the way down. The wax has pooled and hardened into a waxy puddle. And beneath it, on the wooden sill, something strange. A piece of paper, edges charred and blackened. The words are mostly unreadable, but Briggs can make out a few letters. D-O-N-T. And what looks like an L. Don't let, don't leave, don't look. He bags it as evidence. Briggs walks through the rest of the house. The bedroom is untouched. The bed is made. But here's the thing. When he opens the closet, he notices a small duffel bag is missing from the top shelf. He knows this because there's a clear outline in the dust where it used to sit. So Margaret packed a bag. But her coat is still here. Her purse is still here. Where was she planning to go in 9-degree weather without a coat? Briggs steps back outside and finds Daniel Rowe standing by his truck. Arms crossed. Breath fogging in the cold. Briggs asks him when he last saw Margaret. Daniel says he hadn't seen her all day. He was home, watching TV, fell asleep around 10. Woke up to use the bathroom and saw her door open. That's when he called. Briggs nods, writes it down. Then he asks, casually, "Your truck? Been running tonight?" Daniel hesitates, just for a second. Then he says no. But here's the problem. A neighbor 2 doors down, Mrs. Callahan, tells police the next day that she saw Daniel's truck leave his driveway around midnight. She's sure of it because she was up with her newborn. She saw the headlights. And now the question is, why? 2035. To zero the aftermath and investigation. By the morning of December 30th, the entire town knows Margaret Holloway is missing. Search parties form. Volunteers comb the woods behind her house. The riverbank. The old rail yard. People start lighting candles in their windows. A tribute, a vigil, a hope. The local news picks it up. The story spreads. A kind librarian vanishes. In the dead of winter. A candle left burning. A cryptic note. It's the kind of story that grips people. Sheriff Briggs begins piecing together Margaret's final days. Phone records show she made several calls in the week leading up to her disappearance. 3 of them were to Daniel Rowe. 2 were to her sister Claire. 1 was to a locksmith. Briggs contacts the locksmith. He confirms that Margaret had called asking about security upgrades. She wanted to know if someone could get in, even if she changed the locks. The locksmith asked if she was in danger. She said she didn't know. She just wanted to be safe. That was December 22nd. Briggs pulls Daniel in for a formal interview. Daniel is nervous, fidgeting, defensive. He admits he lied about the truck. Says he panicked. He explains that he did leave his house that night, around midnight, but only to drive to the gas station for cigarettes. He didn't go to Margaret's house. Briggs asks why he lied. Daniel says he didn't want to seem suspicious. Briggs doesn't buy it, but there's no evidence tying Daniel to anything. No blood, no weapon, no body. Then a break. A clerk at the gas station confirms Daniel was there. Right around 12:15 a.m. Security footage shows him buying cigarettes. Looking tired, distracted, the timeline fits. So if Daniel didn't do anything to Margaret, then who did? Attention turns to Richard Holloway, Margaret's ex-husband. Richard still lives in Riverside, about 2 miles from Margaret's rental. Police visit him on January 2nd. Richard is calm, cooperative. Says he hasn't spoken to Margaret since the divorce. Says he's moved on. He's got an alibi too. He was at a New Year's party on the 29th, surrounded by witnesses until after 1 a.m. Briggs runs the names. They all check out. Dead end. But then Claire, Margaret's sister, finds something. She's going through old voice messages. Margaret left her, and there's one from December 24th. Margaret's voice is shaky. She says, "Claire, I think someone's been in my house. I know it sounds crazy, but things are moved. My journal was open to a page I didn't leave it on. The spare key I gave Daniel is back on the hook, but I never asked for it back. I don't know what's happening. I'm scared." Claire immediately calls Briggs. This changes everything. If someone was entering Margaret's house, who was it, and why? Briggs re-examines the crime scene photos. He notices something he missed before. A small window in the basement. Partially open. It's not broken, just unlatched. Could someone have come in that way? Forensics dusts it. No prints. But there's a smudge of mud on the sill. Fresh mud. And it's been snowing for days. Meaning someone opened that window recently. Briggs feels the pieces shifting. This isn't a simple disappearance. This is something far more calculated. Margaret wasn't taken. She was hunted. 35-0. 45-0. The twist. Revelation. On January 9th, investigators get a warrant to search Margaret's home more thoroughly. They bring in a tech team to sweep for anything unusual. And that's when they find it. A small camera, hidden inside a smoke detector in the living room. It's battery-powered, motion-activated, and it's been recording. Briggs feels his stomach drop. The footage is reviewed immediately. What they see is chilling. December 28th, 9:47 p.m. Margaret is pacing in the living room. She's wearing a sweater, jeans, thick socks. Her hair is pulled back. She looks exhausted. She lights the candle, places it in the window. Then she sits down at the table and begins writing on a piece of paper. Her hand is shaking. She stops, looks toward the front door, listens, nothing. She goes back to writing. At one point, she whispers something to herself. The audio is faint, but the tech team enhances it. She says, "He already has the key. He's been here before. I know he has." She folds the paper, holds it over the candle flame until the edges catch fire, then blows it out. She places the half-burned note on the windowsill, beneath the candle. Then she stands, grabs a duffel bag from the hallway closet, and moves toward the back door. The camera angle cuts off before showing where she goes. but the timestamp reads 10:53 p.m. So, Margaret left on her own. She wasn't taken. She was running. But from who? Briggs orders DNA analysis on the charred note. It comes back with a match. Daniel Rowe. His fingerprints are on the paper. His DNA is on the corner that was burned. Briggs brings him in again. This time, Daniel breaks. He's crying, shaking, talking fast. He admits he went to Margaret's house earlier that day, around 4 p.m. She'd called him, frantic, asking him to come over. She told him someone had been inside again. She showed him the journal, the moved items, the unlatched window. She was terrified. She thought it was Richard. He wrote a note with her, something to leave behind in case anything happened. A warning. He said it was her idea to burn it, to make it look urgent, cryptic. He left around 5 p.m. He swears he didn't see her after that. Briggs wants to believe him. But something still doesn't add up. 45-0, 55-0. Final twist. Resolution. January 17th, 1999. 18 days after Margaret disappeared. Two hikers are exploring an area near the old lumber mill, about 4 miles outside Riverside. It's abandoned, crumbling, forgotten. One of them hears something. A faint tapping sound. They follow it to a storage shed, padlocked from the outside. But the lock is rusted, barely holding. They pry it open. Inside, huddled under a pile of old tarps and blankets, is Margaret Holloway. She's weak, dehydrated, hypothermic, but she's alive. The hikers call 911 immediately. Margaret is rushed to the hospital. She's treated for severe dehydration, frostbite on her fingers and toes, and mild hypothermia. But physically, she'll recover. Mentally, that's another story. When she's stable enough to speak, Sheriff Briggs sits beside her bed. He asks her gently what happened. Margaret's voice is hoarse. She tells him everything. For weeks, she'd felt like someone was watching her. Things in her house were moved. Doors she locked were unlocked. She'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced someone had been standing in her room. She told Daniel. She told Claire. No one took it seriously enough. Then, on the night of December 28th, she found proof. A jacket in her closet. A jacket that wasn't hers. It was Richard's. She recognized the smell. The cologne he always wore. That's when she knew. He'd been coming into her house, watching her, waiting. She didn't know what he wanted, but she knew she had to leave. She packed a bag, lit the candle as a signal to herself. If the flame goes out, it's time to run. And she slipped out the back door. She didn't take her coat because she thought it would make it look like she'd been taken. She wanted Richard to think someone else had done something to her. She thought it might buy her time. She walked to the old lumber mill, a place she and Richard used to visit when they first got married. She knew the storage shed. She thought she could hide there for a few days, figure out what to do next. But the cold was worse than she expected. She couldn't leave. She was too weak. She survived on melted snow and a granola bar she'd packed. She thought she was going to die there. Briggs listens, his jaw tight. He immediately sends officers to Richard Holloway's house. When they arrive, Richard isn't home. But inside, they find everything they need. A spare key to Margaret's rental house, hidden in a drawer. A handwritten journal detailing his visits to her home, dates, times, what he saw. Notes like, "She's getting suspicious. Need to be more careful." And a map. A hand-drawn map of Margaret's house, with her bedroom circled. Richard is arrested 3 hours later at a motel 2 towns over. He confesses almost immediately. Says he wasn't trying to hurt her. He just wanted to remind her that he was still there, that she couldn't just leave him and move on. He thought if he scared her enough, she'd come back. He thought she needed him. The judge doesn't see it that way. Richard Holloway is charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted kidnapping. He's sentenced to 12 years in prison. Margaret never returns to Riverside. She moves out of state, changes her name, starts over. Claire says she's doing better now, but she still lights a candle every December. Not in the window, just for herself. A reminder that she survived. 55 to 0, 60 to 0, engagement and close. So, let me ask you this. Would you have noticed? Would you have taken Margaret seriously when she said someone was in her house? Or would you have brushed it off as nerves, as paranoia, as someone adjusting to life alone? It's easy to say we'd do things differently. But the truth is, we miss these signs every single day. People tell us they're scared, and we tell them they're overreacting. People show us they're struggling, and we tell them it'll be fine. Margaret Holloway tried to warn everyone. She lit a candle. She burned a note. She told her sister, if anything happens, look at the candle, and no one did. Not until it was almost too late. What do you think about this story? Do you think Margaret did the right thing by running? Do you think Daniel should have done more? And what would you have done if you were in her shoes? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And if this story affected you, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves real mysteries. If you want more stories like this, ones that make you think, that make you feel, that make you question everything, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because trust me, what's coming next will leave you speechless. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the warning is right in front of you. You just have to be willing to see it.